Hello, this is Starry Ari's ASMR. I am Ari, and today we are set up at my kitchen counter because I would like to make some gingerbread cookies. I usually do this in December, but I did not get around to it, and I still really want to make some gingerbread cookies. So this is kind of experimental. We'll see how it turns out. So I think what I'm going to try and do is go through kind of the steps of the recipe. So I have this recipe printout that we've used for years, and this is by Sally's Baking Addiction. I will link this if it's something that you are interested in. I honestly haven't really tried a ton of different gingerbread cookie recipes, but years ago we found this one and we did it and we liked the cookies, so honestly we just never have tried anything else. So let me go through the ingredients. The first one over here that you see behind all of these measuring cups and spoons is flour. I just have everything in our pantry, our normal regular use stuff, in these containers. So we have flour, and then we have brown sugar and butter. In my household, we just replace margarine for butter, and then I need 1 egg and molasses, imitation vanilla, vanilla extract. We are cheap and do not splurge on actual vanilla, so we have imitation vanilla extract. And then in the back you can see there's some baking soda, salt, cinnamon, ground ginger, cloves, and allspice. So that is kind of what we're working with today. So I'm going to go ahead and get started. I have my little stand mixer over here, which is why I think there's going to have to be voiceover because I think that this is just going to be way too loud for ASMR. So the first thing that I'm going to do is take off my watch and my rings, wash my hands again, and put up my hair. So the first thing we need is this 10 tablespoons of butter, and these sticks are very conveniently marked, so I know that there are 8 tablespoons in a stick, and then I had this little smaller amount from something else. So I'm going to first put them in the stand mixer. This butter has been softening, so this is at room temperature. Okay, so I'm going to start the voiceover now because the stand mixer is in fact quite loud. So my stand mixer has the paddle attachment on, and we are just beating the butter until it is completely smooth and creamy. So while the butter is mixing, I'm going to measure out the brown sugar. We need 3/4 of a cup of brown sugar. So I'm grabbing my 1/4 measuring cup, and then I have this bigger measuring cup that I'm going to dump the 3 scoops into for now until the butter is ready. And the butter is ready, so I'm going to dump that in and let it start mixing with the butter. while that is going, we're going to measure out this molasses, and we need 2/3 of a cup. I decided to bring back the bigger measuring cup to measure over because I realized if I spilled molasses everywhere, it would be a very big, sticky mess. So let's try to avoid that. I'm using a 1/3 measuring cup, so we need 2 scoops. And then I grabbed a spoon so that I could really scrape out the last remaining bits of molasses in the measuring cup. I'm just scraping off the sides, trying to clean it off a bit more. Molasses is pretty messy, so I did accidentally drip a little bit. Just wiping that up quickly now so that it doesn't dry and get even more sticky. So now that we have the brown sugar and molasses in there, we are going to let that mix on a medium-high speed until everything is combined and creamy looking. Now I'm going to stop it and lift up the top so that I can scrape the sides and bottom of the bowl just to make sure that everything is getting mixed really nicely and that nothing is sticking to the sides of the bowl. And I'm just going to scrape off the excess from my spatula. Let's go ahead and lower this to let it mix for a little bit longer. Now that it is looking nice and creamy, I'm going to stop it again and raise up the top. Now I'm going to crack 1 egg in the bowl, and it sadly did not go well for me. I did unfortunately get shell in my batter, maybe because I was recording, but that's okay. Luckily it was just the one big piece of shell that I was able to fish out. And then we also need 1 teaspoon of vanilla. So then we're going to beat this into the mixture on high speed for about 2 full minutes. And the recipe does note that the butter may separate, and that's okay. So while that is mixing, I'm going to grab this separate bowl to mix our dry ingredients. I am starting out by measuring my flour. We need 3.5 cups of all-purpose flour. So I start out using the 1 cup and do 3 scoops. I do not know what the proper way to measure flour is, and we do actually have a kitchen scale that I could have used because the recipe does give measurements in grams as well, but I decided that I didn't need to do that. So it's just spooning the flour into the cup. And now I'm grabbing this 1/2 cup for the last of our flour. Next, I am adding the baking soda, and we need 1 teaspoon of that. And then now I will add the 1/2 teaspoon of salt, and I actually did a little bit less than a full half, just because I am using margarine, which I believe is already salted, Now we need 1 full tablespoon of the ground ginger. My ground ginger was a little clumpy, which I think means that we definitely need a new one. I went ahead and used it anyways. It really wasn't too bad. And we need 1 full tablespoon of cinnamon as well. I think I did end up doing a little bit of extra cinnamon on accident, but that's okay. I really like cinnamon. Now we need half of a teaspoon of ground allspice and another half of a teaspoon of ground cloves. Now I'm going to grab my wooden spoon here and stir all of this together to get it all nice and combined. I have put the mixer on a low speed, and I'm just going to very, very slowly mix in the dry ingredients until everything is fully combined. I do have a hard time doing this without getting any flour on the top of the mixing attachments, but that's okay. I let this go on for just a little bit until everything was fully mixed together. The recipe states that the cookie dough should be quite thick and slightly sticky. Now that that is fully combined, I'm going to go ahead and lift up the top and clean off the paddle attachment with my wooden spoon, just to make sure that I get all of the dough back into the bowl. We are going to end up dividing this dough in half and refrigerating it overnight. So I'm setting out my first piece of plastic wrap, and I'm just going to stretch that out, and then I'm going to take my dough, about half of the dough in the bowl, and put it right in the center of the plastic wrap. And I'm going to add just a little bit more on there. Now we are going to wrap this tightly in the plastic wrap. So I'm folding one edge over like that. And then I'm going to wrap the other edge over and fold in the ends. Now I'm just going to press the dough and make sure that it is nice and tight and secure in the plastic wrap. I'm going to repeat the process with the remaining amount of dough. So let's spoon that right to the center. Scrape out any last remaining bits from the bowl. I really tried to get pretty much every last bit, but some of it was all wanting to hang onto the spoon. Now I'm just going to wrap this bit of dough in the same way. So I'm going to fold over this first edge, just pressing the dough. Fold over the other edge, and then fold in the ends. And now I'm just going to press the dough, and there we go. We have our 2 bits of dough, and I'm going to now place The recipe recommends that you chill the dough for at least 3 hours to 3 days, or freeze it. I did decide to freeze one disc so that I could make some to take with us right before our little weekend getaway with my family. So I am going to now roll out the dough and cut the cookie shapes. First, I'm going to grab this bowl and put a little bit of flour in it so that I can use this to flour my work surface and the dough as needed while I'm rolling things out. I did lay out some paper towels on the counter so that cleanup at the end can be a little bit easier. And then this wooden cutting board is what we are going to be working on. Here is my little container of cookie cutters. We keep them in this empty metal container from some hot chocolate. I love cute little containers like this, and I always feel bad about throwing them out. So this one stores our cookie cutters. And we need a rolling pin. So I have this wooden one. And then I forgot to mention, but I did already preheat the oven to 350 degrees. So here is the first baking sheet. This is actually the first time that I'm using this baking sheet since we got it for Christmas. And I am going to be using our silicone baking mats. Here is my disc of dough. Let's go ahead and open up the container of the cookie cutters. The first one is this nice tree, and we have a stocking, a snowman, a candy cane, gingerbread man, and then we do have one more in there, and it's like a Santa head, but we never use it because it's just a bit larger than the other shapes. And oftentimes it's hard to tell what that shape is because we don't fully decorate our cookies, whereas the other ones are pretty easy to tell. So I'm going to start by flouring our work surface. I'm just going to sprinkle some flour around, and the recipe does say that the dough can be pretty sticky and that you may need to be quite generous with your flour. Now let's go ahead and open up the dough, just moving the rolling pin out of the way. So I'm going to take the plastic wrap off of the dough. Now I'm going to spread the flour out a little bit. I should have done that before I put the dough on the cutting board, but I didn't, so here we are. Just spreading the flour on the dough a little bit too. Now I'm going to take the rolling pin and just roll it right over the dough to spread it out. I'm not a professional baker, so please excuse my technique. I roll out dough maybe once or twice a year, so not a lot of time to gain experience or get a lot better at it. The recipe recommends about a 1/4 inch thick. I tend to do mine a little bit thinner because we like our gingerbread cookies like that, and it also just makes more cookies. But I honestly just kind of roll it out until I think that it looks okay. Now I'm going to grab the cookie cutters, and usually I like to lay them out just to kind of get a visual of where everything is going to go and make the most out of the space that we have. I don't want to be rolling out the dough a lot more than I have to. I'm going to peel away some of the dough from the cookie cutter and pick up our first one, which is this little gingerbread man. And it just comes right out of the cookie cutter. I'm going to set that over on the sheet. And then let's grab the candy cane. I feel like the candy cane cutter always kind of gives me some trouble. So I did accidentally mess up the bottom of that one a little bit, but it's okay. These cookies may not end up being the prettiest, but they at least turn out pretty tasty. So now let's go ahead and grab out the tree. I like to just press down the cookie cutter and then wiggle it a tiny bit, and it just kind of separates the dough a little bit better. Now kind of rearranging things on the cookie sheet. The recipe recommends that you place the shapes 1 inch apart on the baking sheet. I think it's really, really satisfying just peeling the dough away from the cookie cutters. I did accidentally have some dough stick to the cutting board, so I think that I either did not rub the flour into that area enough, or I accidentally rolled out the dough a little bit too hard in that spot, but that's okay. I just added the broken snowman to the dough pile, and then we'll just try again in the next round. So I'm grabbing the candy cane and the stocking from the remaining dough, and we're gonna try to get these out. Peeling it away from the stocking. And luckily that one came up without any issue, but unfortunately the candy cane was giving me a little bit of trouble. It was giving me some problems, I think, just for that same reason. So I decided that I would scrap that one too and try it again in the next round. So now I'm going to gather all of the dough scraps and form them into a little ball. I tried to get up some of the extra dough that was left or stuck onto the cutting board so that it didn't just keep sticking to itself, but I didn't get all of it. Now I'm going to put some extra flour because I really didn't want it to stick again. I'm going to roll that out. Trying to fix the crack that was forming there because it was getting kind of large. Rolling is one of the really satisfying parts for me. Of course, and cutting the cookies out. So let's grab the gingerbread man, the candy cane, the tree, the stocking, and the snowman. I'm going to press all of those in. And I'm going to grab the snowman first, just because I really want that one to go well this time. And it did. And then I decided to just place that cutter again since we were missing out on a snowman from the last set. And now the gingerbread man. And then the other snowman. Now the stocking. The candy cane. And the Christmas tree. And now I'm going to gather all of the scraps once again and just form them into a little dough ball. Let's flour the work surface again and just spread that out over the board. And let's roll out this dough ball. It's getting nice and flat now. It did start sticking to the rolling pin there a little bit, so I decided to stop. I figured that was probably enough. And I'm just going to do this one tree right now because I only need one more cookie to fill this first sheet. And here is our first batch of gingerbread cookies ready for the oven. The recipe recommends baking for about 9 to 10 minutes, and I usually just do 9. Now I am laying out my second cookie sheet with another silicone mat. Let's finish using up the rest of this rolled out dough that we already have. I'm going to use the candy cane, the stocking, and the gingerbread man. Just pulling away some of the excess dough. This batch will be less cookies than the other one, but that's alright. The recipe states that it should yield 24 cookies, which would be about 12 cookies per disc, and that's how I know that it must be rolling out our dough a decent amount thinner than the recipe calls for, because I think I'm probably going to get about 20 cookies just from this one disc. But like I said, the size is just our preference, and I feel like the cookies still end up being a pretty nice texture. I'm adding just a little bit of extra flour to the pin, and then rolling out this dough. Now I'm just peeling away the dough from the snowman. And let's peel the excess dough for the gingerbread man. The leg on this one got a little bit funky, but that's alright. Now, taking out the candy cane, there was a little extra dough in the cookie cutter, so I tried to get that out as well. Unfortunately, that candy cane stuck to the board, so I just scrapped it back into the dough. Trying to wipe up a little bit of the extra dough. So let's go ahead and flour that again. And let's roll this out. I'm going to take the candy cane and the stocking. I can only fit 2 on this one. Oops, that one just fell right onto the board. I think I should have put a little extra flour on the rolling pin again because it was sticking, but I decided to just go with it. Then I grabbed the Christmas tree. Let's peel away the extra dough scraps. I'm doing my last one, which is the snowman. And then now I'm gathering the last scraps of dough. And I decided for these last little scraps I would just do one round cookie that I can easily test my icing on. So I'm just pressing this into a round shape. Here is our second sheet of cookies. The first batch of cookies was ready to be pulled out of the oven, and these do need to cool on the cookie sheet for 5 minutes. So I popped the second batch into the oven to bake, and while I waited for the first batch to cool, just did a little bit of cleanup. Here is my cooling rack with some paper towels underneath to help catch any crumbs. And I'm going to place these pot holders here just in case the pan is still a little bit hot since it has only been 5 minutes. And here are our nice baked cookies from the first batch. I'm going to take them off of the cookie sheet and place them on the cooling rack. These turned out a lovely, lovely golden brown color, and they smell so delicious. Now moving the tray out of the way, and by editing magic, the second tray of cookies is also now ready to be transferred to the cooling rack. One of the candy canes, unfortunately, I stuck my thumb in it when I was taking the tray out of the oven, so that's what that little impression is. Now for decorating these cookies, I usually just make a cookie icing and dip them face down, and then just leaving it at that. We don't really do anything more, so they never end up really looking too pretty. And looking back, I should have just done that again. But this year I wanted to get fancy. I picked up this pastry bag and I wanted to try piping the icing on. The cookie icing recipe I use is also from the same baker, so I will link that recipe in the description too. So for that we need powdered sugar, meringue powder, and water. And we're going to be using the stand mixer again. The first thing that I'm going to do is put all of the ingredients into the bowl. I don't have an attachment on the top just yet, just to make it a little bit easier to dump everything in. I decided to half the icing recipe, doing 2 cups of powdered sugar. I'm using a half cup just so that it's a little bit easier to reach into the container. So I needed 4 total scoops of that. And we're going to need 1.5 tablespoons of meringue powder and 4 to 5 tablespoons of room temperature water. And I'm going to put the whisk attachment on the stand mixer. The recipe says that you should let it mix on high speed for 1.5 to 2 minutes. Now, I had a few moments where I went wrong with this icing, but the first one was that I think that I did not let it beat for long enough, but the recipe notes say when lifting the whisk up off the icing should drizzle down and smooth out within 5 to 10 seconds. But I should have actually watched the video that goes with that recipe, and I would have seen that my consistency was actually quite a bit thinner. So I think I could have let it beat for a little bit longer, is what it says, or I could have added a little bit of extra powdered sugar to thicken it up, but I did not do either of those things. That is all from hindsight. This is my first time, I believe, ever using a piping bag, and it was a lot more complicated than I expected, or I at least made it a lot more complicated than it needed to be. And then this here is another point where I should have recognized that it was again just way too thin when I was taking my spoon to it, but I didn't let that stop me. I just went right ahead and continued. I did put down a paper towel just in case it got messy, and decided to pour the icing into the piping bag. Again, I usually would just dip my cookies face down into the icing, and I should have done it, but I wanted to try and get fancy. I'm also not usually very precise with like artsy things, so I don't know why I thought that a piping bag would be a good idea for me, but I did. So just letting that all pour into the piping bag. And here is me trying my hand at my round cookie, just kind of testing it out. So I did a circle around it, and then I was just kind of filling it in with a little bit of icing squiggles, and then I was planning on taking a toothpick to spread it all out. But as you can see, it started to drip down the sides while I had stepped away, which looks very sad. And these cookies were, fully cooled down, so I don't think that they were melting the icing. I think that my icing was the issue. So I tried to spread out the icing on the cookie, which I think actually went pretty well with a toothpick, despite the circumstances. I think it did make the surface smooth, but it was all just still dripping everywhere, so it did not really turn out very nice. And then I just carried on with my plan. I was just sort of hoping that everything would work out okay, and I just kept trying to do the same thing with all of the other cookies. I seriously would have had to do a voiceover for this section anyways, because I had to keep stopping because I was laughing so much about how everything kept turning out. Like, look at that sad candy cane. That poor thing was just looking rough. But they are still very delicious, even if they, don't look the best. And I was making these just for fun, so luckily, there's no pressure on them actually looking good. Just my pride and ego that no longer exist. I clearly knew just enough to be dangerous with the piping bag, which was to say that I knew nothing at all. the rest of the cookies, and that's what they ended up looking like. And here they are in our little cookie container. Beautiful. And then I wanted to show that even though they look like this, we have been eating them and they're still delicious. This was one that I had as a little morning snack with my tea. Let's break it. And they're just so nice and soft in the middle. And I just dipped it in my tea a little bit. These are just so yummy. Thank you so much for following along with this chaotic baking journey. I hope that you enjoyed it, and I hope that you have a wonderful rest of your day. Goodbye.